Number 1. BTK Killer, Dennis Rader. In Wichita, Kansas, the 1970s were haunted by a shadow. Families were slaughtered inside their own homes. Women were stalked, bound, and strangled. The city was terrified, but even worse, this killer refused to stay silent. He wanted credit. He called himself BTK, bind, torture, kill. Dennis Rader was not content with just killing. He wanted the police, the press, and the public to know exactly who was in control. He mailed letters filled with chilling details only the killer could know. He even included drawings of his crimes, taunting investigators with his twisted fantasies. One letter read, "It's hard to control myself. You probably call me psychotic with sexual perversion hang-up." It wasn't just a confession. It was mockery. The arrogance worked. The entire city was paralyzed with fear. Parents wouldn't let their children play outside. Police set up task forces. And yet, BTK always seemed to vanish into thin air. For years, his letters stopped. People thought he had gone quiet, or maybe he was dead. But in 2004, nearly 30 years later, he started writing again. Same taunting tone, same hunger for attention. And that arrogance, it finally betrayed him. BTK asked police if sending files on a floppy disk could be traced. Investigators told him no. He believed them. When he mailed the disk, detectives pulled metadata linking the files back to his church and to a man named Dennis Rader. In 2005, the mask fell. The church president, the family man, the seemingly normal neighbor, was unmasked as Wichita's most feared killer. For decades, BTK fed on fear, mocking the police at every turn. But in the end, his need for recognition was his undoing. Number 2. Zodiac Killer, the man who mocked police. In the late 1960s, California was gripped by fear. A faceless predator stalked the night, killing couples in lovers' lanes, ambushing taxi drivers, and leaving behind a trail of terror. But what made him truly unforgettable wasn't just the murders. It was the way he mocked the police. He called himself the Zodiac, and he wanted the whole world to know his name. The Zodiac mailed letters to newspapers, each dripping with arrogance. Some contained chilling details only the killer could have known. Others carried strange symbols, cryptic ciphers that promised to reveal his identity. He demanded that his words be published on the front page, threatening more bloodshed if ignored. One of his most famous letters declared, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." It was a slap in the face to detectives, a direct insult to their inability to stop him. The public became obsessed, poring over his codes, trying to crack what the police could not. In 1969, he even phoned the police himself, calmly describing one of his shootings before hanging up. Each taunt was calculated. Each word, a dagger aimed at the heart of law enforcement. Despite nationwide panic, the Zodiac slipped through their fingers time and time again. His letters continued for years, sparking fear, fascination, and endless speculation. Some of his ciphers were solved, but the most important one, the one that could reveal his identity, remains a mystery to this day. The arrogance, the games, the puzzles, they weren't just about murder. They were about power. The Zodiac didn't just kill people. He killed peace of mind. And the chilling truth? He was never caught. His mocking laughter still echoes in unsolved codes, daring us to find the face behind the mask. Number 3. Son of Sam, the killer who terrorized New York. New York City, 1976. The city was already drowning in crime, fear, and darkness. But that summer, a new nightmare began. Couples sitting in parked cars, young women walking home at night. Someone was hunting them. And every bullet carried the signature of a madman who called himself Son of Sam. David Berkowitz wasn't just a killer. He was a showman of fear. After shooting his victims, he left behind chilling letters addressed to the police and the press. His scrawled handwriting mocked investigators, daring them to catch him while he kept pulling the trigger. One letter began with the words, "I am a monster. I am the son of Sam." In another, he taunted New Yorkers, promising that the killings would never stop. Newspapers splashed his words across the front page, and the entire city froze in terror. Women dyed their hair blonde or cut it short, terrified because most of Berkowitz's victims had long dark hair. Couples stopped going out at night. New York, the city that never sleeps, was suddenly too afraid to even leave home. Police received thousands of tips, but Berkowitz stayed one step ahead. He seemed untouchable, his letters dripping with arrogance, as if he was laughing at every failed lead. The game went on for over a year. Finally, it ended with a simple parking ticket. Berkowitz's car was spotted near a crime scene, and inside, detectives found the evidence that tied him to the murders. The man who had terrorized New York, who mocked police in letter after letter, was finally unmasked as a postal worker with a taste for chaos. But the scars he left ran deeper than his bullets. Son of Sam didn't just kill people. He killed an entire city's sense of safety. And he enjoyed every second of it. Number 4. Jack the Ripper, Letters from Hell. In 1888, the streets of London's Whitechapel district ran with fear. Women were being slaughtered with surgical precision, their bodies left mutilated in ways too gruesome for the newspapers to fully describe. But the killings alone weren't what terrified the world. It was the voice behind them. The killer didn't just strike in the shadows. He wrote letters. The first, addressed to Scotland Yard, was signed Jack the Ripper, a name that would forever echo in history. His mocking tone dripped from every word, ridiculing the police who chased him but could never find him. One infamous note, known as the Dear Boss letter, bragged about his killings and promised more blood. Another, the Chilling from Hell letter, arrived with half a human kidney inside, a gruesome gift meant to prove his authenticity. Every letter stoked panic, splashed across newspapers, sending London into a frenzy. Citizens demanded answers, but the police remained powerless. Detectives patrolled the streets, hundreds of men were questioned, but Jack the Ripper always stayed one step ahead. And with every mocking letter, his legend grew darker. What made it worse was the mystery. The letters showed intelligence, arrogance, and a sick sense of humor. He taunted them, calling the police clueless, and the journalists hungry for blood. London wasn't just being stalked, it was being humiliated. Despite mass hysteria, the murders suddenly stopped. Jack vanished into the fog of history, leaving behind only speculation. Some say he died, others believe he fled. But his words remained, etched in police archives, proof that the killer wasn't just murdering women. He was murdering the city's faith in justice. To this day, Jack the Ripper's mocking letters are studied, debated, and feared. He was the first modern serial killer to use the press as his stage, and his voice still echoes from hell. Number 5. Robert Hansen, the Butcher Baker. Robert Hansen, known as the Butcher Baker, lived a quiet life in Anchorage, Alaska. On the surface, he was a baker, a husband, and a father. But beneath that mild exterior, he was hiding a nightmarish double life. From the 1970s to the 1980s, Hansen hunted women in the most terrifying way imaginable. He would kidnap sex workers or dancers, take them to his cabin in the Alaskan wilderness, and assault them. But the horror didn't end there. Hansen had a twisted obsession with hunting. Just like wild animals, he would fly his victims out into the remote forests, release them, and then stalk them with a rifle and a knife. For him, it was a game. For the women, it was sheer terror. Authorities believe Hansen murdered at least 17 women, though some estimates go as high as 30. What made his crimes especially disturbing was the methodical, cold-blooded way he carried them out. He kept a map with X marks showing where he buried his victims, almost like trophies. Hansen was finally caught in 1983 after one victim managed to escape his clutches and alert the police. During the investigation, detectives uncovered his private butcher's map, leading them to the graves of his victims. The quiet baker, who nobody suspected, turned out to be one of America's most sadistic killers. Hansen was sentenced to 461 years in prison, where he died in 2014. His story remains one of the most chilling examples of how ordinary people can hide monstrous secrets. The man who served pies in the morning was hunting humans by night. Final resting place. Robert Hansen died in 2014 and was buried in Anchorage, Alaska. His grave remains unmarked, fitting for a man who left behind only terror. Number 6. Charles Cullen, the Angel of Death. Charles Cullen looked like a normal nurse, moving quietly through hospital halls in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Patients and families trusted him. He wore the uniform, carried the stethoscope, and spoke with the calm authority of someone who was supposed to save lives. But behind that mask of care was one of the deadliest medical serial killers in American history. Cullen's weapon wasn't a gun or a knife. It was medicine. For years, he injected patients with lethal doses of drugs like insulin and digoxin. Many of these patients weren't terminally ill. Some were close to recovery, others were in for routine treatments. But Cullen decided who lived and who died. He later admitted that he killed simply because he felt helpless in life and wanted control. Authorities believe Cullen murdered at least 40 patients, but the true number may be closer to 400, making him one of the most prolific killers in modern times. What's more chilling is how long he got away with it. Despite suspicions, hospitals often dismissed him quietly rather than investigate, fearing lawsuits and bad publicity. Each time, he simply found another job, and more patients died. His downfall came in 2003, when nurse Amy Luffren, a close colleague, worked with police to secretly record his confessions. Her bravery exposed Cullen's trail of death and finally stopped him. In court, Cullen showed little remorse, often mocking victims' families during testimony. He was sentenced to 11 consecutive life terms without parole. Charles Cullen sits in a New Jersey prison today, a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't lurk in dark alleys, but inside the very places meant to heal us. Final resting place, still alive. Cullen is serving multiple life sentences at New Jersey State Prison, and he will die behind bars. Number 7. Norbert Polka, the hammer killer cop. Norbert Polka wasn't just a police officer in West Germany during the 1980s. He was supposed to be a protector of the public. But instead, he turned into one of the most shocking examples of law enforcement gone rogue. Behind the badge, Polka was living a double life as a ruthless killer. He became known as the Hammer Killer because of his brutal method of murder. Between 1984 and 1985, Polka murdered multiple motorists, beating them to death with a hammer. His motive was as twisted as his crimes. He wanted to steal their cars to use in bank robberies. After killing the victims, he would carry out carefully planned heists, vanishing before police could catch him. The public was terrified. A killer was on the loose, robbing banks and leaving bodies behind. But no one suspected that the very man helping investigate the crimes was actually the murderer. Polka even participated in the manhunts, playing the role of the diligent officer while covering his own tracks. But cracks started to show. Investigators began connecting the murders and robberies, and suspicion grew. When Polka realized the net was closing in, he made his final, horrifying move. In 1985, before police could arrest him, he killed his own wife and 2 sons, then turned the gun on himself. The revelation that a trusted officer had secretly been a sadistic murderer sent shockwaves through Germany. The man sworn to uphold the law had been using his uniform as the perfect disguise. Norbert Polka's story is a dark reminder. Sometimes the real monster hides behind authority. Final resting place. After his suicide in 1985, Polka was buried in Germany. His grave remains obscure, a chilling footnote to one of the most shocking betrayals of the police oath. Number 8. Gerard Schaefer, the killer cop of Florida. In the early 1970s, Florida trusted a young deputy sheriff named Gerard Schaefer. He wore the badge, carried the gun, and drove the patrol car. To the community, he looked like the perfect officer. But behind the uniform was a sadistic predator who used his position of power to hunt his victims. Schaefer had a disturbing obsession with kidnapping, torturing, and murdering young women. His twisted method often began with him offering them a ride or pretending to arrest them for safety reasons. Once he had them under his control, he would take them to remote areas, swamps, woods, or abandoned fields, and unleash unspeakable cruelty. In one shocking incident in 1972, Schaefer abducted 2 teenage girls while on duty. He tied them to trees in the woods, gagged them, and told them he was going to kill them. But a sudden police call forced him to leave, and miraculously, the girls escaped and reported him. Schaefer was suspended, but incredibly, he was only charged with unlawful imprisonment. Nobody realized yet that they had a serial killer in their ranks. Months later, bodies of young women began turning up across Florida. When police searched Schaefer's home, they found a collection of jewelry, diaries, and even grotesque written stories describing torture and murder, many of which matched real unsolved cases. He was eventually convicted of murdering 2 girls, but is suspected of killing more than 30 women. Chillingly, Schaefer bragged about his crimes from prison, writing letters that mocked the victims' families and hinted at even higher numbers. In 1995, Schaefer was stabbed to death by another inmate, an end as violent as the life he led. The story of Gerard Schaefer proves that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the very ones sworn to protect. Final resting place. Gerard Schaefer was buried in Florida after his prison murder in 1995. His grave is largely unvisited, a silent reminder of a killer who once wore a badge. Number 9. David Parker Ray, the Toy Box Killer. David Parker Ray looked like an ordinary mechanic living in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. But behind his quiet life, he hid one of the most disturbing torture chambers in American history. Ray was nicknamed the Toy Box Killer because of a trailer he customized into his personal dungeon. Inside, police later discovered a nightmare: chains, whips, surgical tools, electric shock devices, and even elaborate machines designed for torture. On the walls were diagrams showing how to restrain women, and on the shelves, detailed journals describing his crimes. His method was as horrifying as it was methodical. Ray would kidnap women, often with the help of accomplices, and imprison them inside the trailer. Before the torture began, he would play a chilling tape recording he had made, a cold, robotic voice describing in detail what his victims were about to endure. The women were then subjected to days of unimaginable cruelty. Authorities believe Ray may have murdered up to 60 women, but shockingly, no bodies were ever found. The desert around Elephant Butte Lake is suspected to be his burial ground, but to this day, the mystery remains unsolved. Ray's reign of terror ended in 1999 when one of his victims managed to escape, running naked and chained into the street. Her testimony finally exposed the horrors of the toy box. In 2001, David Parker Ray was sentenced to 224 years in prison without parole. But in a twist of fate, he only served 2 years. In 2002, he died of a heart attack behind bars, never revealing the location of his victims. To this day, locals whisper about the desert sands, believing the remains of his victims are still buried beneath them. Final resting place. David Parker Ray died in 2002 and was cremated. His ashes were given to his family, leaving no grave for the public to mark, just unanswered questions and an endless desert. Number 10. Manfred Seal, the deadliest cop suspect, Germany's Hesse Ripper. Manfred Seal seemed like an ordinary man living quietly in Hesse, Germany. But after his death in 2014, police uncovered evidence that linked him to some of the most grotesque and disturbing murders in the country's history. What made the case even darker was the strong suspicion that Seal, long believed to have ties with law enforcement, may have used insider police knowledge to commit his crimes and avoid capture. Seal is suspected of being the Hesse Ripper, a serial killer active from the 1970s to the early 2000s. His known victims were prostitutes and vulnerable women. The murders were marked by extreme brutality, mutilations, dismemberments, and in some cases, organs removed. The killings bore signs of both ritual and sadism, leaving investigators stunned. What's chilling is that Seal lived undetected for decades. He was a family man, blending into society, while allegedly committing horrific crimes. When police searched his home after his death, they discovered disturbing writings, secret collections, and links to crime scenes that had remained unsolved for years. Investigators also believe he may not have acted alone. Some theories suggest Seal had an accomplice, possibly another person with ties to law enforcement, making the case even more unsettling. If true, it means the killer had both protection and knowledge on his side, ensuring he remained invisible to authorities. Although officially never convicted, the evidence left behind strongly points to Manfred Seal as one of Germany's most sadistic serial killers. His death closed the door on many answers, leaving families of victims without justice. The case remains one of the most shocking reminders that sometimes, even in modern times, serial killers can live right among us, undetected, unsuspected, and shielded by the very system meant to protect people. Final resting place. Manfred Seal died of cancer in 2014 and was quietly buried in Hesse, Germany. His grave remains anonymous, but his suspected crimes continue to haunt investigators and families alike.